Good morning, everyone. So, today you and I are going to talk about data. Yes, let's talk about data. So, first and foremost, I feel like I need to explain some stuff. Why do I want to talk about data and what could possibly be valuable about data? Well, if you haven't noticed, you may have heard that term thrown around a little bit, or this term rather, the information age. You and I are living in the information age, and you may not have reflected all that much as to why it's called the information age. Now, this is of course extremely subjective and my personal interpretation of what this actually means, but I'd like to share it with you because I think my take on this may be a little bit different from what you've been told so far about the information age. Now, let's define something first and foremost. I will make a statement. It's a broad statement, so bear with me. But my statement is this. I argue that today in IT, just generally speaking, unless you are selling a product or some service, a traditional type of business, then you're not a purebred information company. But I will argue that purebred information companies, such as, say, Facebook, for example, Facebook does not sell a physical good of some sort. Their main business, the business idea, their business model is all oriented around the product that they are providing, their platform, if you will, Facebook itself. Now, they have services that they offer that gives value, but it's still connected to the main product. That is, per my definition, a purebred information company. Google is very much the same type of thing. Amazon, to a degree, but they are still selling services and goods, or rather they didn't start out that way, but they are a little bit in the gray zone. For the most part, I will define one of these companies as a information company. Now, I will make the statement that in the world of information companies, there are two sorts of companies. You have data producers and you have data aggregators. And the difference, let's define those. A data producer is the sort of company that produces information. We're going general here, just bear with me, it will make sense, I hope. And then you have data aggregators. And data aggregators are the sort of companies that aggregate information to provide a value to their users. Now, let's take my company, for example. I work for a data aggregator company, which basically is a company that consumes data streams from some other source in order to do something meaningful with it, to provide some type of insight or some type of service to an end user. Now, one of the most common requests that we get at my company, and it's not just in my company, even friends of mine have been out talking to, or spouses of my friends have asked me, even for my own startup, have asked me about features that they would like to see in the product. And that's great. I mean, if you have users that are interacting with you and like your product and they make feature requests, I mean, feature requests is one of the most flattering things that you can possibly get. They will at some point ask you for something such as, let's say, take my company, for example. One of the most common feature requests we get is associated with users wanting to know more about their subscription. Now, because our users don't know how we can tell them so much about their subscriptions and basically their transaction history and so forth, they have no idea how it works. To them, it's all magical. They don't understand why that request is so difficult for us. Because in reality, without saying too much, what we are doing is that we are consuming a data stream that we have no control over. In other words, we get, as a data aggregator, we don't actually own the data that we present to the user. Therefore, we cannot control what we're getting. And the issue with that is that when we get a feature request that is associated with, say, more information, we can't really accommodate that in a natural way because we are limited by the data producer company. The data stream that we are consuming is only giving us so much information, and unless that information contains the things that we need in order to provide that value to our user, there's very little we can do. We can ask for more data to the company if we're big enough and make a deal of some sort. Hopefully the company that we are talking to, the data producer, is going to be able to accommodate that. Or we can find other places where we can kind of compose that data together or figure it out from different data streams, because sometimes you might have to have several data streams in order to provide that feature request that your user is asking for. Now this gets really, really, really tricky really, really quickly. So as a data aggregator, you are always limited by the data that is provided to you from the external source. It's actually something that I touched on when you talk about OAuth, for example. I said in a previous video about validation that one of the biggest benefits to having your own validation, your own registration and all that stuff is that you can ask for information from your user that you may not actually get from someone like Google or Facebook or GitHub or whoever you want to handle your validation. Although it's very convenient, you don't control the data. So, why am I talking about this? Well, I'm talking about this because from my perspective, data is the limit for the most part. It is very often that you find that unless you own the data, and hopefully all of the data, you are limited in what you can actually provide in terms of features. Now, don't mistake me for saying that you should be a data producer, because the issue with being a data producer is that it's much harder to be a data producer than it is to be a data aggregator. Why am I saying this? Well, because if you've ever tried to start your own company, such as, let's take Facebook for example. Facebook, when it started out, was a data producer platform. Now, the issue with a data producer platform, such as a social media platform, is that it really only provides value to anybody when it grows to a certain point. It has to be big enough so that it produces the sort of data that people are willing to pay for. Which means that being a data producer company starts out as something very tricky for the most part. It's very difficult to get a project that is just about producing data from scratch up to a feasible business idea. I mean, even Facebook are still struggling today to monetize all that data. That's why it's so tricky to be a data producer. About being a data aggregator, that's very easy, because what you really what you need to do as a data aggregator is to just find different, look at the different vendors, data producer vendors, see what they are offering and find now this is also of course tricky, so it's a relative term, but looking at what they are producing in terms of data and see, hey, we could put this together into a meaningful application for our users and ship that as a product. You don't actually have to create the data yourself, because creating data from nothing is actually very tricky. So, what I want you to take away from this is that one of the things that I think that you should really consider when you're building up your company and you're creating a product of some sort, I would suggest that you have a really long, hard think about what data that your product needs in order to produce a certain amount of value, and really think about data streams, because data is everything in the information age. If you have the information, then you can ship the feature. But if you don't have the information, there's very little you can do. Have a great day.